there are stories where banks have spent millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars trying to go down the right path, trying to do the right thing. But unfortunately, they just fall back into their old habits on how they've done things, and that's been destructive.
I used to refer to any digital transformation, any large digital transformation, whether it's a core replacement or a new front end, whatever it might be, as CTO killers.
So how many of those products are important to your business and everything? And they sort of go away and they do an audit. I mean, well, you're sort of right. Like 150 are important, but the other 850 are they're there because we had to create a product to do something. You said it before. I call it the CEO killer, not the CTO killer.
I'll take it.
Yeah, the CEO killer. That you're the CEO sitting there going, can I just band-aid this for another 2 or 3 years, and then it's the next person's problem?
That's a good point.
Yeah, which is quite often what happens.
Hello and welcome to FintechOS Evolv. Today we're with Myles Bertrand, the CEO of Tuum. Delighted to have you here. We're going to talk about digital dreams or core nightmares, whichever one we end up flipping on. So, first of all, Myles, why don't you tell us a bit about Tuum?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
That's right.
Great way to spend an afternoon. I'd rather be stuck in the office, so I appreciate it. Tuum is we're actually an Estonian headquartered company. We've been in business now around 6 years, so we're probably still considered a bit of a new player on the block when it comes to core banking vendors. We're an Estonian founded business. We're about 120 people, and we've got offices in Estonia, London, and Dubai. People ask me where I'm based. I say I'm based out of a suitcase. Is basically where I'm based.
Yeah, your accent doesn't give anything away.
No. Or actually, some people say I'm South African, but I'm actually originally from New Zealand. But then I spent too much time in Australia, and it actually comes down to how many beers I have, and then people sort of understand where I'm originally from. But I think Tuum's business. We've really. I had the fortunate pleasure to join the business about 2 years ago as an operator CEO, and inherited a business that sort of had a really strong founding team. And I think one of the things that sort of really set us apart is that founding team had a previous business where they'd actually been building mission-critical infrastructure for financial institutions for about 18 years. Yeah. So they'd seen specialized projects, they'd built lots of big systems, and it really allowed them to sort of know what are the problems and what are the issues. So, when I came in, and having been previously in this industry for a period of time, asking some really pointed questions about the problems I knew, it was quite reassuring to sort of hear, oh, you've already thought about that, or you've dealt with that, or you've come across that problem already. So that was really good. So, we're very much focused on 3 key things for our business. We sort of help people solve a problem, particularly whether it be well-established financial institutions or some of the new players. We help people do something new, because we find a lot of, the banks and institutions are on big legacy infrastructure, and it limits their ability to actually be innovative and do things. So we've got some great use case stories where we've helped big institutions actually do something really quickly and be really innovative. And then the third thing, not quite so much, but still quite often, is that helping organizations expand geographically. So when sort of banks want to move out of their local country and go cross-border, they don't want to necessarily have to pick up their big sort of infrastructure and sort of deal with that. So, been in business about 6 years, really focused on UK, Europe. We did expand into the Middle East middle of last year, and that's a very exciting region, lots going on there. And also we continue to work really closely with our partners, like you guys, of course, because I think, that cultural DNA, Tuum is very much about, we don't do everything front to bank for a customer. So we're very much about partnerships and the ecosystem approach and working collaboratively as to what's the best outcome for organizations.
I mean, you've been in the kind of the next gen core banking platform space for a number of years now. But can you remember when you first looked at the kind of legacy core structure and thought, there's a problem here to solve?
I mean, that's exactly that. I mean, when we first sort of tackled it, it was, the driver used to be, you would be a customer of a bank and you were sort of locked into that bank, and you sort of said, oh, okay, well, I just have to deal with whatever that bank gives me from a capability and a functionality point of view. And then you started to see the evolution of some of the digital players and people saying, hey, I want to change that dynamic. I don't know about you, but for me personally, the thought of going to a bank branch these days is like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
I do everything I can to avoid. So you've seen a real demographic change in the type of customers. So it's not, mum or grandma going down with their passbook to deposit money and take money out every day. We want everything digital. We want everything fast. And I think what's really was interesting when you initially I go back 6 or 7 years ago, you'd have this conversation with banks. They go, that's not real. We're okay. We're too big to fail or too big to lose customers. And you've really seen that shift over the past 5 to 7 years, I think. The most interesting thing I think we first got into, though, was actually you talk about putting mission critical infrastructure on the cloud, or you'd talk about let's put some services in AWS or Google or Microsoft. And first of all, the bank would laugh at you, but then the regulator would laugh at you as well. Fast forward 5 years, it's the absolute opposite. Regulators are actively encouraging, they're very supportive of it. We still do see in some countries where the regulators are still a little bit conservative about the personal data. But actually doing the heavy lifting from a processing perspective, they make it efficient, make it sustainable and reliable. So it's been really interesting to see the way the market has changed in such a relatively short period of time, 5 or 6 years.
I think the behaviours changed, demographics changed, the expectation has massively changed, and I think the neobanks have come in and they've really challenged the traditional banks to change their game and mix it up. And we still find a lot of banks cling on to this legacy infrastructure, right? Why are they doing that?
I think people may have heard me say this before. I'm going to be quite, and some people say I'm controversial, but it's not about the technology.
And put the PG warning on now.
Yeah, PD. It's not about the technology. It's actually about the people, and it's the cultural view within these institutions. I think they're all trying to do the right thing, but you're talking about mission critical. It's like a black box. Don't touch it. It ain't broke. So we really quite often come across. You see more and more senior people come into financial institutions who are ex-AWS, who are ex-Google, and they're really trying to drive change. But then you sort of come down a couple of layers to the actual engine room and the doers, and they go, look, I've been doing it this way for 15 years. I'm not really interested in doing it another way. Because it's not about replicating your processes or what you do right now and trying to do that on new technology. You actually need, if you actually approach it differently and re-engineer, you're actually going to get to a better outcome, etc. And so I really think cultural change is one of the things that is really underestimated when banks take on big projects like this.
I think you're spot on. I think often people talk about digital transformation, and sometimes I lead the conversation. Just remove the word digital for a minute, and as an organization, how are you transforming? Because what you said. If you're not looking at this kind of an opportunity to have a blank sheet of paper in front of you and design process, policy, journeys as the way you'd want them now, rather than the way they have been, and all you're doing is simply replicating and moving from this to that, all you're going to have is an expensive new toy. It does the exact same thing. And maybe it is a fear of change. I think expertise is absolutely right. I don't think there's the right amount of expertise. It's nice to hear that people are coming from that area into banking to try and drive that. But culture... I see it all the time.
I mean, that I've got some, I won't name names, but there's been a number of projects I've been involved with over the past sort of 10 years and various guises and various roles that I've had where you start this in exactly the right spot. Like with the intent on where you're going. And then what happens is immediately they shift away from that and they just go, but this is how we used to do it, or how do we do that? And immediately, and then you've always got to think about, the banks are risk adverse and they need to be. That's the way they're engineered. Then they start putting that layer upon, and eventually these projects grind to a halt. And the scary thing is, we've all heard, you talked about digital dreams and transformation nightmares. Both, there are stories where banks have spent millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars trying to go down the right path, trying to do the right thing. But unfortunately, they just fall back into their old habits on how they've done things. And that's, been destructive.
I used to refer to any digital transformation, any large digital transformation, whether it's a core replacement or a new front end, whatever it might be, as CTO killers. Because a CTO start the plan, they'd never be there at the end. And it kind of goes back to your point, because it takes a couple of years. Often people who have been there forget the reason why you're doing it in the first place, or somebody else comes in, it's their vision. So you never get to finish it. And unfortunately, what it drives in the business is this kind of attitude of, it's never going to happen. Never going to happen.
But I want to temper that with the fact, but there are some success stories out
there.
Give us
a success story.
No, but I'm just saying it's wrong of me to blankly say that every single one of these projects fail. But there are some really good stories out there, and I think the ones that you're seeing which have been really successful right now are, rather than trying to do the big bang, pick and left and move it, we're seeing exactly sort of along the lines of where we try and sort of position ourselves is that this incremental transformation.
It's a modular approach.
Again, I mean, for those who don't know, Tuum, before we were Tuum, we were modular technology. So that's actually how we sort of evolved as an organisation. But exactly that, solve a problem, find something new, test the new ways of working, and then roll it out. And fortunately for us, we have one of our largest clients is a big institution, and exactly that. They were trying to launch a new consumer lending product. They had their own in-house existing platform. They also had another parallel legacy style platform that they were implementing, and they just said, we can't do anything here. And then their innovation lab came to us and said, hey, can you help us do something? So we did, and it still took a long time because they're a very big institution. It still took 12 months, and we had to integrate into 140 systems because they're just a big institution. But they will openly say it's the most successful project the bank's done in the past sort of 20 years. It's now the fastest growing portfolio. And they now said, okay, we've proven this works, and now they're actually going to pick up their entire consumer lending business and basically migrate that over. So, so I think there's different ways to tackle this, but I think the real success stories we're seeing, I think that's one of many. I think even sort of the other vendors in the market of the modern players have had those sort of success stories as well.
Because there have been so many failures, and that's a great success story, right? So what was the, I don't know, 2 or 3 absolute golden nuggets or blind spots that you addressed that made it success? Because was it those incremental deliveries that drove value that people could touch, feel when it became accountable, and you just built expectation, and everybody got along the journey, and there was a belief that it was going to be done because you could see it, touch it, feel it. Was that the difference?
I think that was one of the key differences, and I think again, like I said, you need to find those people. Back to that culture topic. It was finding the right people within the business who understood that it just can't be a cookie cutter of what you've done previously before. Like actually that was the true catalyst. So this, the example I gave was that the innovation lab within this business actually had quite senior horsepower sitting behind it. So they sort of had they weren't questioned every single time and said, they sort of said, hey, we trust you a bit here. You're doing this the right way, but you're mitigating risk. And hence that. So I think it's a lot about, again, lots of people start this with the right intent, but you got to stay the course and go the journey. And if you basically immediately try and pull it back into the way you've worked for 20 or 25 years, you're going to have a problem. I'll tell you a funny story. We, in a past life, met with a CTO of a bank, went through the whole process, and said, "Look, love the technology. This is going to solve my problems." He says, and then he said, "So I'm a really important man in the bank." I said, "I know that." He goes, "I've got a team of 350 people." He says, "Do you think I can increase my team to 450 or 500 people doing this?" And I said, "The opposite. You're probably going to go." And he goes, I can't talk to you anymore because I don't."
Empire building.
It's empire building. So it's just again, it's all these little different cultural nuances that you have to navigate. And I think, to be really honest, for an organisation like ours at Tuum, we're not big, okay? That old adage, you never got fired for choosing IBM, So you've got these guys, you sit there and go, well, I could take a bit of a risk with, yes, they have the best technology, yes, I can see a path, but actually it might be a safer bet for me to go over here. And so that's we openly talk about it. It's one of the challenges that you need to find the right person in the organisation who will get past that and understand, hey, if I manage the risks the right way,
Yeah.
I should be comfortable put a bit of skin in the game.
I always think, we talked about this before, but when the banks are looking at replacing the core, whatever it might be, and they can have 150 product lines, right? And if Tuum didn't meet every single requirement for every one of those 150, it's like, it doesn't quite fit us. When are they actually going to change to actually what are the 10 core product lines that fit the criteria fantastically, and then will evolve with the technology as it goes along? I often find that's a barrier.
It always is, and so I think that's the thing. That's why we start small, incremental. Again, I think you and I spoke about this previously, but number of times I've gone in to have meeting with institutions and say, we've got 1,000 products, and they're so proud that they've got 1,000 products, and then you ask the pointed, challenging question, going, so how many of those products are important to your business and everything? And they sort of go away and they do an audit and think, well, you're sort of right, like 150 are important, but the other 850 are, they're there because we had to create a product to do something. So
bespoke something and custom made something.
And if that's the barrier for you to make a decision, then you're definitely not ready for this. But if you find institutions, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the 150. Can you solve those for me? Yeah. Yes. And then you sort of work through that. I truly believe, particularly for any sort of tier 3 and above bank, most of them will never be on a single core going forward. They're going to have a multi-core strategy. Now, whether that be one modern core that does that 80% heavy lifting for just the stock standard consumer, SME, card, mortgage, etc., and then they've got something else for that bespoke 20% you need. That's the sort of mindset you've got to have and sort of think about. I mean, I know the stories out there of some very big banks around the world that are running like 41 different core platforms. Yeah. I know another bank down in the Pacific, it's got 17. Yeah. And you sort of sit there and go, how is that possible? But each individual business unit, because it's so big, they just go off and do their own thing. So, and I think that's where people like ourselves and obviously how we work together as well is that we can go after this sort of, don't have to chase the tier 1s, actually. It's these actual tier 3s to tier 5s who need to be able to be nimble, to be fast, to do things a whole lot quicker, but they understand that they're more adaptable to all these points we've talked about. So it's an interesting, like the market is so interesting.
I was going to ask you about multi-core actually, because one of the things to build a business case to replace a core or to upgrade it, whatever it might be, is the ability to you're going to reduce your cost because you can get rid of one core and bring in a super duper new one. But actually, in reality, that very rarely happens, right?
No,
because the back book will sit on the old core. And the migration strategy between old and new is so tricky and hard work, unless you tell me otherwise, that you end up running two, and that one just runs off over a period of time as the book runs down. But I still speak to people who still hold on to the dream of, I can simply get rid of A, put in B, happy days.
Personally, I no disrespect to anyone who listens to this. I think you're in fantasy land.
Yeah.
Like, there ain't that many projects in the past 10 years, 15 years where you could say that was successful, A-grade story it ever happened. Yeah. I think people have to be realistic. What I think that's exactly that, is that there is efficiencies to be made. Yeah. There is cost savings to be made. Yeah. And so you got to think about, you've got your big boat and your small boat, or whatever analogy you want to use, but you have to be. But you don't need 17, or you don't need 10, or you don't need 12. You can probably get away with 1, 2, or 3, depending on how big you are. Yeah. You might have one for wealth, for example, but you might have one that deals with all your retail and your consumer. Yeah. Comes down to it. So, it's really it's the number of conversations you have, and it's you'd see it as well, Mark, with you when your teams meet with people, is that understanding who have you got, what the mindset of the person you've got seen on the other side of the table. Yeah. Because now it's typically never one person who's making a decision. You've got a CTO with one agenda, you've got a CDO with another agenda. Yeah. You said it before. I call it the CEO killer, not the CTO killer.
I'll take it.
Yeah, the CEO killer. That you're the CEO sitting there going, can I just band-aid this for another 2 or 3 years, and then it's the next person's problem?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Which is quite often what happens, because it is known that like if you think about the big bang core replacements, 50% of them fail.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the stat.
Yeah.
So, but the other interesting stat was, there was a stat came out a couple of years ago, and I still talk about it, was they surveyed, I think, 1,000 bank CEOs around the world. And I think the percentage was something like, it was 68 or 70% said if they don't evolve, they will die. So it's there in the back of their mind, but how quickly it's going to happen. And you mentioned Revolut before. I mean, I used to sort of, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was sort of, oh no, y'all stick. I am a massive fan because I am a truly global citizen. I said I live out of a suitcase.
Of course, yeah.
I try to use the traditional banking rails to move money around. Revolut is my friend because it has made my life revolutionary from that perspective. So, that's a true example where a business model on modern technology, the speed that they can do things and they can evolve is incredible.
I think you said earlier on, if you don't modernize, you're probably dying. I completely agree. I think I've worked with a few banks who have looked at core replacements and upgrades and whatnot, and you look at it and you think it doesn't really make massive business sense to do that at the minute, because actually you've got big problems in origination, for example. And so actually you should spend in there to get more in the funnel, and that bit, just as I say, put a bandit over it, it'll kind of do. But actually what they're really doing, if strategically, is getting themselves ready for what I think, and probably what you think is going to happen in the next 5 years or 3-5 years, is this consolidation of the institutions. Certainly in the UK, there's just so many of them. It's going to consolidate, and there's going to be this big M&A play. And so to even be in the game, to even have chips on the table, you're going to have modern cores to be able to absorb and if you haven't, you're just not going to be a part of the game. You're going to be irrelevant.
But see, the interesting thing is exactly what you said there. If you think about the stack that a bank needs front to back, like you've got your UX, your user experience, and you've got KYC and AML and the fraud and various things, then you've got your core and etc. So, and I'll give credit where credit's due to a lot of institutions. They've spent huge amounts of money on their front ends.
Yeah.
So there are some amazing user experiences out there, and which has created this sort of persona of we're an incredibly modern digital experience, everything. But little they know there's still the hamster running on the wheel in the background to keep this thing going. And I think that's been okay for the past sort of 10 years, and that's working. The problem is now, let's use that, our favorite topic, AI. Like I personally think that AI is going to have a big impact on financial services.
It took 22 minutes to mention AI. That's a record.
I was trying not to, but I'm working.
It's usually minute 2. But
no.
You've done well.
But I do think it's going to have a big impact on things like support, servicing, credit decisioning, places like that. Which is that's where it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Problem is, you can't have a core that goes to sleep for 5 or 6 hours or does batch processing. So they've actually got to start moving to this real-time, always-on, API-first type core. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that tomorrow, because AI is still going to take 2, 3, 4 years to really hit its straps. But I think it's got a lot more legs than blockchain and some of the other things that have come over the past few years.
Yeah.
But what that means is institutions got to start thinking about it now, because you can't flick a switch and be ready for that. So I think there's some real drivers now, which is sort of having to make a lot of these institutions say, I've got to modernize.
Yeah.
One, it's that. Two, as I talked about earlier, we as consumers, I have a different expectation on how my bank services me now.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, not being overly critical, but I still move a lot of money from Europe back to my home in Australia. And I send the money, and it takes 3 days to basically appear in my account, because they still have quite an old settlement system in the background.
Yeah.
Whereas on Revolut, I can move money, FX, exchange in real time, appears in 2 minutes in my Aussie account. And you sort of sit there and go, how can they get that? How can they get that right? But I have to wait 7 days for my money to clear from Europe into on the traditional rails. And so I think there's drivers that are going to have to actually start doing this, which, hopefully for organizations like us is a great opportunity. And so I'm really excited about what's going on in the market and what's going on in the space right now. I think, they've spent all the money on the periphery. They've got to start delving into the black box.
Yeah, I think one of those drivers you talked about is going to be, the speed to market. Everybody's striving for speed to market, whether it's a new core or new products or new services or new journey, whatever it might be. So, it is a competitive weapon. that's in your armory in Tuum?
Again, same conversation, same big customer. We were talking to them and said, "Oh yeah, we want to launch this new account thing." Okay, oh cool. Yeah, so, 2027 is that, and you sort of sit there and go, "We could spin that up for you like in 2 months, like less than that, like a new thing."
Yeah.
Oh well, we're still like it's just
It's something to retract.
Again, it's the cultural. It's just people got to understand that the tech is that there's great tech out there.
Yeah, it's the governance that takes 9 months.
Oh yeah, and let's not get started about regulators. So
It's just internal governance. I think when you're any pretty much standard bank now to even launch a digital transformation project replacing a core, you're probably looking at 9-month lead-in time by the time you've done your RFI, your RFP, all your demos, and if you get to a point where you have a POC, and then then the budgets and the teams and the CTO that wants to grow his team to 450 rather than reduce it down to 45, and the politics and the steer codes, the excos, the boards, and then 9 months later you forget, what was we actually doing this thing for?
Yeah.
Oh, we're kicking off now, and 2 years later you kind of get what you want.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's another. We got a bunch of discussions going on, but there's another really funny one at the moment that. This organisation made a decision that we're going to do something and we're going to use an external vendor.
Yeah.
So they've gone through this massive process with an external vendor, and it's down to sort of like 2, and we're fortunate enough to be one of them. And then all of a sudden, internal IT popped up and went, "Well, we could do that."
Internal build,
like we can do that. And they go, it will cost twice as much and it will take twice as long, but we can do that. Rather than the potential risk of you going with an external vendor. So, even that, like just the factors of what we do, because for Tuum as an example, we are the heart and lungs of an organisation. So we're not talking about some guzzy front end here. Like we are the engine that keeps this thing running. Like if we fall over, the bank falls over.
Absolutely.
So it is a big decision, and it's quite an emotional decision.
Yeah.
So you go back to your point. It's not a 3-month sales cycle. For us, it's 9 months best case. It's 12 to 18 months in most cases, irrespective of whether you're a tier 1 all the way down to a tier 4 or tier 5. It's a big decision, and we have to be very respectful of that.
What do you think, in your eyes, truly kind of defines a digital first bank? Can you think, is there a good example? Maybe we're not name names by all means. This is you, but if I say digital first bank, you sort of mentioned Revolut. What truly makes it digital first?
Oh, I think for me, and I'll give you another personal experience, not even a work experience, a personal experience.
You're not moving money around, are you?
No, not this time. But I think you've got the user experience, which is great, and I think most good institutions have a great user experience right now. But when you get past that user experience, then it actually gets to all of a sudden a piece of paper has to be signed, or something has to happen, and you sort of
some form of intervention,
sort of intervention, which stops you being a full process. So I think those that have really got that all the way through are really good. So I'll give you an example. So I'm based overseas. I owe my money overseas, but I still have a mortgage, etc., back in Australia. And I was swapping banks. Digital experience was fantastic, really good. But then, but you need to sign this paper before we can actually push your application through the credit process within the bank. And you sort of said, so, okay, I'm on the other side of the world. Can DocuSign? Oh, no. We still need a wet signature. So you've got, but once that single piece of paper was done, fantastic. The process was really, really good. Of course, until it came to the final actual documents, which again, were this thick, and I'm on the other side of the world. So next thing you know, DHL is couriering documents to the other side of the world for me. And so that comes back to sort of what we're saying is conceptually, I think a lot of organizations really are trying to create fantastic user experience and digital experiences. But then our old friends, the regulators, or particular ways that, it says you just need a wet. What's the difference between DocuSign and a wet signature in the modern world? It's probably more secure to actually do DocuSign than it is to do. It
tends to be more internal governance that they
processes.
Think that's what it should be.
100%.
I get it. We go to see clients and we talk about we design journeys, and you get second line functions who will be adamant. It's regulatory. You must do it this way.
Piece of paper.
And the great thing about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Is I literally whack it straight in. Is this actually a regular? No, it never has been. But you've been doing it for 20 years. You've convinced yourself it is. So actually,
Yeah. So I think that is, so truly, could you sit there and say, I mean, I actually honestly can't think of, I mean, I think Revolut's a good example. Like, I've never had to sign a piece of paper with Revolut. I have I haven't done a loan, which is different. I understand potentially, but maybe not. But I've set up multiple accounts in multiple countries, etc., and it was all through my phone.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, I've got a digital card on my phone in my wallet, a physical card turned up to my address in Australia. No paper was signed. Like, it just didn't. And then now, day to day operationally, I'm a massive advocate.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic experience.
I genuinely can't remember the last time I actually used a physical card. I genuinely can't. If my mother-in-law was here, she'd done in like using cash machines. She's the other end of the spectrum. But yeah, I can't remember. It's always been Apple Pay or digital card now. It goes back to behaviours and expectations, how it's evolved. It's the norm.
It is.
Yeah.
So I think for our demographic, we're just used. Well, I mean, we're particular. I mean, I consider myself a bit elderly these days, but I think because I've grown up in this industry, I'm sort of really comfortable with it. But I mean, I think the expectations of the next phase of people that are coming through, those that are in their 20s going into their 30s now, who are starting to become sort of financially secure and starting to build wealth. Like, we're talking about retail and consumers really good, but let's go back on the wealth side. Like, it's like, again, so there's going to continue to be an evolution right through, I believe, financial services for the next few years, because it's going to be driven by the end customer saying, I need things now,
exactly.
I need them fast, and I want to do them digitally.
Yeah. And all on my phone. Yeah.
I mean, losing my phone is a worse experience than losing my wallet these days.
Exactly right. Yeah. It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Now, you work with fintechs and traditional banks and neos and challengers. So what could some of those traditional, and even, I always feel bad, 'cause I always lump traditional banks together, but what could banks learn from fintechs? I mean, we talked about culture. What else could they learn? Is it the fact that, I don't know, development cycles? Is it fear of failure? Is it fail fast? Is it incremental stuff? What is it? What's the 2 or 3 golden nuggets they could learn from how fintech could operate?
You just said a couple of them then right there. I think it's fear of failure is a big, like, fintechs are prepared to actually take a bit of a gamble. So they'll fast fail with products and they'll try and do something, or they'll try understand what's actually going on around the world, globally, industry-wide. Like, actually, the way sort of some of the neos were able to respond to COVID in regards to, and whereas the traditionals were just like spinning their tires going, how do we deal with this? That was a really good example of how quickly you could see sort of people got some innovative products up there, what they were doing with digitization, digital currency, things like that. So I think it's that fear of failure, and I think, but you've got it's the double-edged sword, because you've got these, they're big, they're established, they're fundamentally bulletproof to a certain degree. The term too big to fail, even though through
a few of them did.
Few of them have been a bit on the edge, but so I think that's certainly a really strong aspect there. But then the fintechs, they are, they really are driving change, etc. as well. So it's sort of, I think the big guys need to think. Again, I'm going to circle back. You need people in there who are prepared to start thinking a little bit differently. Because I'll give another good example. I was working in a countrywide project. I won't say where they were building out a real-time payment system for the whole country. Okay, which was good. So everyone was on board, and then they said, well, and because it was payments related, they said, wouldn't it be really good if we created a centralized fraud function across this? And immediately, these so-called partners working together went, my fraud kung fu is better than his fraud kung fu and better than his. And so you could not get them to sort of like, wouldn't you be able to have a much better protection if you've seen both ends of the transaction, how you could, and they just weren't willing to budge on that. So that was just a really good example of, they sort of were there, but then they believe there's still that competitiveness between them, because there's probably a lot of parts of financial services, and you do see it where working collaboratively together as a group can be really, really effective. But then there still is that competitive tension, and I think it's made worse now, because actually these so-called upstart digital banks that they were never worried about are now actually starting to have some real impact on customer bases. And hey, I can put my hand up and say I'm one of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those startup banks have they've adopted a methodology that's worked for them. And we talked about a proper agile methodology where they are delivering really quick in those sprints. They're getting products out. They're iterating, getting better and better. But when still in the world of banking and financial services, as much as people talk about agile, I'm yet to come across anybody at senior level that doesn't fall waterfall. They always want the end result. That's what they're paid for. Give it to me until you've got it. I don't want to know. So even that approach there, it comes back to culture again, doesn't it, Myles? Until you adopt that culture and you truly buy into it, you're going to struggle to keep up the pace.
But I go back to what I think I said earlier. I think I'm seeing a bit of change. I think you really are seeing some where people want to do something different, and I think it's driven by the fact that you stop having CTOs who have been in the bank for 30 years and worked their way up through the ranks. With the utmost respect, they've been fantastic at their jobs and they understand their business front to back. But actually having people who come in who say, well, I've lived in the world of AWS or Google or Microsoft or et cetera for a bunch of years, and they're just bringing, they respect the risk and the regulatory side, but they're saying, hey, we can actually do things a little bit differently just because we did it that way for the past 10 years. Yeah. So I think that is starting to filter down through a lot of organizations that you're really seeing a different approach. So, and for me, I think that's what I'm really excited about with the industry and some of the conversations. Like I see, when I first got into this sort of space with Mambu a number of years ago, like they'd laugh, like I'll put your core in the cloud, and they'd be like, ha, and then the regulator would laugh at you as well. Like it was really challenging. Those aren't the conversations anymore. They're very supportive of that. It really is now. They know they can't take 2 years to do things anymore. Yeah. The problem is they've still got some infrastructure or some tech that takes them 2 years, and their processes take 2 years. But, I'm seeing change is really good, and I think we're starting to see that with a lot of conversations we're having at the moment, that even some of the big guys have sort of finally realised, hey, we've got to do something different.
It's great you're having conversations, because I think if I was one of those banks and looking to do some form of core modernisation, Myles, what is it that you would tell me? Everything we've discussed today, the mistakes and the fact that 70% of a foul, when you sit in front of that CTO or the CEO or the board, whatever it is, and you're talking about Tuum or whomever it might be, what is it that you tell them to say, this is to make the success, these are the 3-5 things you must do or you mmust think about to really drive that success?
I think that the thing that we always tend to say to them is don't think too big. So it's that, like, so we always, when we do our discovery process, it's always those 3 questions. So, have you got a problem? No, I don't. Do you want to do something new? No. You want to expand? No. Then what?
Don't do it.
You're just kicking tires then. Like, obviously procurement's just meeting their KPIs for the year. So I think an understanding, and then I think finding that, so say it's one of those 3 things, you say, okay, that's a really good starting point. But then also driving that, the number of times when my teams have done demos, for example, and you get the users or the technical guys, okay, so they go, this is how we do it, show us exactly how you do it over here. You have to break that culture really early on, because otherwise you'll just end up with a list of gaps 9 kilometers long, and you just spiral down a rabbit hole, and you won't go
shape
anywhere.
The process around the tech, not the tech around the process.
And make sure, I think it's really important that it's really interesting when you speak to a lot of these organizations, like how their cultures are different. So some are very tech-driven. So technology has all the power. And then you've got these other institutions where business has all the power. So you also need, I think it's really making sure that there's good collaboration.
There's always tension.
But if you've got tech and business aligned, it's really important. So a red flag for our teams normally is if there's only ever tech people in the room, or if there's only ever business people in the room, making sure that you've got both parties. So I think it's getting all the right stakeholders across
and the ability to translate between the two.
Correct, 100%. So, our I think that's where we're really conscious to make sure what we call our solution engineers, or our pre-sales team, they really make sure that we try and always do it in pairs, and there's always one who's very technical, and there's also one who's a bit more business and
the
process driven. So, but I think those are the real nuggets to really,
Do the banks ever come to you and say, Myles, look, everybody's left the room. Our CEO's left the room. I said, Myles, we need some serious expertise in here. I can't say it in front of tell me who to go and get. Do you ever get into that kind of strategic conversation?
Yeah, we do. Like quite often, I mean, obviously we're a vendor where we just have the tech. We're not a system integrator.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not a deployer. We're not sort of, you can rattle off the name of all the big players in the marketplace, and you can also rattle off the name of all sort of our big competitive core vendors in the space, where they've got an army of professional services people they bring to the table. What we have done very similarly is but we do have strong partners with a lot of organizations who specialize and who have built centers of excellence about how to get this right.
Yeah.
That does get asked quite a lot. I mean, I think because the challenge you've got with someone like us is because there's a lot of vendors you can go out there and they give you everything front to back. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily good. Some components are good and some are not so good, but they can give you one-stop shop. Whereas our world is always, hey, I use the analogy, which people have heard me say before, we're the engine, you build the car you want around us.
Yeah.
But so we'll say, and then it'll say, so you choose the wheels, the doors, you want to be a Ferrari, you want to be a Toyota.
Yeah.
We'll just be the engine that drives that. But then we do see a lot of time where they go, look, that all sounds fantastic, but where do we start? So you sort of need to give them a blueprint and sort of say, okay, well, we believe, here's 3 or 4 people that are good at this. Here's 3 people we've worked with these guys before. So we do try and we see ourselves sometimes getting dragged in and asked to be a little bit consultative around what we do. But also because of that, we do have to be a little bit agnostic as well. So I can't sort of put all my eggs in one basket, which is a little bit of a balancing act.
How many times have I seen that people build a Ferrari but drive it like a Fiat? It's my favourite saying.
100%. 100%.
So look, I've got to mention it now. So AI, right? So about 20 minutes after you mentioned it, it took me even longer. So I like biting my tongue. So AI is going to be massive in our industry, right? It's going to be a real game changer for those that want to use it in the correct way and find the right use cases. And it's been a big bugbear of mine for probably last year or so. Everybody talks about this massive subject. It's like crazy. You just get lost in it. But now we're actually starting to get into proper use cases of AI where you're going to drive value. And you can see that you see how it's going to change your operational efficiency and drive down costs and all that kind of stuff. So in the world of kind of next gen core, are you starting to play with the AI machine?
So actually we have. So we actually have been using AI in regards to sort of some of our development life cycles and how we look at our code and how we develop our product and stuff. So we are using it ourselves, sort of obviously still humans involved, but we're using it to do a bunch of the heavy lifting. I think we hear a lot of talk about it. So philosophically for us right now, we're not going to go build our own AI capability, but what we're ensuring we're AI enabled.
Yeah.
Which means, because we know that sort of our types of clients are going to go and basically make big investments with OpenAI or ChatGPT, like whoever it is. So we just need to make sure, as I said earlier, that we have a capability that whatever they want to do with AI upstream or downstream of us,
you consume it,
we consume it, we give them the data they need, we give them the access they need. So it's certainly something that's front of mind for us. As I said, it's not a right here, right now type thing, but it's certainly something I think that all right across the industry, I think there's going to be a whole lot more.
It must be. I mean, you're sitting in a really good place with AI because with Tuum being this next gen platform and API driven and the ability to do that. Some of the more traditional cores that are probably not the right term, but maybe hard coded and very difficult to change and historically have shown real struggle being able to push data to various different platforms and systems. With the world we're going into being AI enabled, as you said, that's going to be another one of your armory because you are going to be enabled. These guys are probably having to spend a shed load of money to even get to that point.
I mean, I consider myself educated on my competitors, but no expert on that. But I think, definitely, I think they will have to be thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the challenges: is that are they able to be in a position where they can take their existing platform and then they can make the step up? Or is that a bridge too far, where someone they're going to have to think about replatforming completely? And that's a 3 to 5 year exercise. That's not something that you can build out. Well, mind you, it depends how good AI is and how good they are with your code. Maybe they could refactor their whole platforms in 2 minutes. But let's not test that theory right now.
Sure. We're coming to the end, Myles. So I always finish with all my guests with a similar type of question. It's like kind of forward-looking question.
Mm-hmm.
So take your world in core banking, modern core banking. Where do you think, if we could fast forward to 3-5 years and we're sitting here having this conversation again, what do you think we'll be talking about?
Well, I won't be sitting here. I'll be on the beach with a cocktail. But
with all this money you keep transferring around, I don't think you're going to be here.
Look, I think I'm going to answer that with two responses. The optimistic me is going to say that all the things we've talked about, we've seen real momentum across our industry, and that actually the tools, the technology, the customer experience, everything has continued to evolve, and we're seeing a lot of really well-established organisations are in a really good place, and I hope and I see a bit of that momentum. The pessimist in me is going to say, the momentum will continue, but then the regulators will get involved.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And again, they'll sort of say, well, we're not too sure. Because, you talk to any bank, they say one of the biggest issues that they spend 75 to 80% of their budget on basically staying compliant and keeping the regulators happy. Yeah. So, I mean, I genuinely do hope that a lot of the innovation we're seeing will actually drive that, and the regulators get behind it and really support it. But, you think of, there's lots of scenarios of things that have happened over the past 5 to 10 years. We can talk about blockchain. We can talk about, the ups and downs of crypto. We can talk about, is that same thing going to happen to AI from that perspective? I don't know. So I hope we can sit here in 5 or 6 years and say, it is an amazing, what's happened with financial services, the way that people are able to basically consume different types of products, their ability to, I mean, that'd be an amazing conversation to have.
Yeah.
But pessimistic me says there's been lots of those opportunities in the past sort of 10 to 15 years, and in a lot of cases, here we are, and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And when I talked about signing that bit of paper for my mortgage, that was only last year, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that was a 10-year ago thing. That was a last year thing. So incredible digital experience, but I'm still currying bits of paper around the world, which just seems in the modern age insane.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So, Myles, I really enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for your insights. You've promised me an amber nectar.
We'll go and have a frothy after this.
Exactly. I was trying to use the right terminology. Is it Castlemaine or Foster's? I'm not quite sure.
Oh no, none of that Australian rubbish.
None of that rubbish. Look, thank you. I'm sure you'll be on again. Obviously, FintechOS and Tuum are working together to do some sexy stuff, which will be great to see evolve over the next few months, and hopefully we can win together, which will be even better. And for people listening, if you enjoyed today, subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And
sounds good.
We'll get some new content out very shortly. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cheers, Myles.
Good to see you.
See you, bud.
Thanks.